How's it going, and welcome back to another video. If you remember in my last video, I did a quick look and a small review of this lens here. This is the Kamlan 50mm f1.1, and I thought it took very good pictures, and it was at the cool price tag of $160. And it did very well for being in that price category. So today we're going to take it and compare it to the Sony 50mm 1.8. We're going to do this comparison for a few reasons. One of them is to just see how well the image quality stacks up between these two lenses, and to kind of try and verify if this actually is an f1.1. There are a few people in the comments saying, how do you actually know if it's an f1.1 or if they're just printing that on the label? So we're going to compare these two and see what exactly is the difference between a alleged f1.1 and a verified f1.8. Another complaint that kept popping up in the comments was how bad the bokeh looked. I don't think that this was because it wasn't out of focus, but that it wasn't very smooth unless it was completely minimum focus and the background was completely blown out. So when there was still details in the background, this lens didn't really wash them out very well with the creaminess of the bokeh. So in order to test that and compare it towards nicer lenses, this one's marginally nicer, selling at about $300, which is just under double the price of this. We've got another lens here to be the end-all be-all of benchmarks for both of these lenses here. And this is the Leica 50mm f1.4. This lens should verify both of these lenses in a few ways. One, image quality. This here is, I think, between a $2,000 and $3,000 lens. That's 10 times the cost of this one and nearly 20 times the cost of this one. Do you get 20 times the performance out of it? Absolutely not. But it may show you how close you can get to a Leica quality lens with spending less than $200. So along with image quality testing, we're also going to see how bad the bokeh actually is in this and how good it is when you drop some real cash on a lens. So when I shoot the image comparison shots with these lenses, I'm not going to shoot this standard tree across the lot because I got some flack in the comments for what I took a picture of to test the image quality. What I'm going to do to test the sharpness is shoot the brick wall, lots of little details, and then for the bokeh test, I'm going to shoot something at the minimum focus of the furthest minimum focusing lens, if that makes sense. Then we're going to shoot it at a couple different apertures and see which one wins as far as bokeh goes, which one creates the most defocusing, and just a few different little apples to apples kind of things. So let's run outside and get started. So I got this neat little adapter here, which is designed to let you fit Leica L mount lenses onto an NEX camera. I got this for $12 on Amazon. Link will be in the description. So we're going to start off with the Leica because it's got the furthest minimum focus distance at 0.7 meters, which is about 2.5 feet. We're going to be focusing on this flower here. While it is moving around a little bit, I'll make sure my shutter speed is adequate. So what this test is going to do is let us determine what the background of the images look like when we shoot lenses wide open from the same distance. Then we're going to stop them down to f2 and see what the background looks like when they're all the exact same aperture. So we're going to have wide open, all different apertures, f2, all the same apertures. And just to see which one produces a more pleasant or more defocused background. All of my shooting today is going to be done with a remote, so I won't be having to touch the camera. So here's something interesting I noticed while shooting these pictures. This picture here was shot with the Sony at f1.8, as you can see here. You know it's the Sony because that's the only electronic lens that sends any information back to the camera. So look at the overlap of the fence posts and see how much they're overlapping by. This is wide open f1.8. And they're overlapping by just a little bit, the little bokeh balls over there. And look at when I set this to f1.8 or f2. This is the Kamlan lens. Look at how much more out of focus the background is on this shot here. Now I'm going to crank this up to about f2.8 here and watch it come on back. And that's about where the Sony lens was. And I'm up at f2.8. So what does that mean this lens is? Is it wider than f1.1? If everything else is wider than the given values of the other lenses, does that mean that I'm actually shooting at f1.8 when I'm shooting at f2? And then what does that mean for f1.1? Is it actually wider than f1.1? Is this actually like f.95 or something? Let me know down in the comments what you guys might think. Also, this is what the background looks like of this image here, just to give you guys an idea of what it looks like when it's actually in focus. Alright, let's check out how these images turned out. Over here in the caption area, you can see which lens I used and the aperture I shot it at. I started with the Leica in red, the Sony in green, and the Kamlan in yellow. As we can see here, this is a Leica 1.4 at 1.4. Then we've got the Sony 1.8 at 1.8 and the Kamlan 1.1 at 1.1. So comparing these two together, so with the background blur, the Kamlan definitely wins against the Sony, but that's at the expense of some image quality. Jumping in here, you can see that the Sony is significantly sharper, and this is at f1.8, so this is wide open for the Sony, but this is also wide open for the Kamlan. Sony to the Leica, you can see again the Leica wins versus the Sony. And zooming in here, we see the kind of image quality that we can expect from this. It's actually pretty impressive at how well the Sony holds its own against such an expensive lens. So this is at f2. We've got the Leica and the Sony again. But looking at the bokeh in the background, we can see that it's got a very octagonal shape to it, while the Sony is definitely more round, and this is at the same aperture. This is f2 and f2. At the same distance with the same focal length, so that's kind of an interesting difference there. As you saw earlier, the Kamlan is way more defocused at f2 than the Sony is. These are both shot at f2, but the Kamlan doesn't look like f2, which makes me wonder if it's actually wider than it states on the lens. And now let's take the Kamlan back to f2.8 to give us a similar look. This is 2.8, this is f2. This is still more out of focus in the background than the Sony is. I don't know what this means. It seems like we're almost a full stop of difference between the background blur in these shots. So I'm not exactly sure how this works, but this Kamlan lens is very confusing. So let's go to the image quality. We got the Sony in the green, the Leica in the red, and this is wide open. This is f1.8, this is f1.4. And as you can see, the Leica is absolutely tack sharp. I mean, this is right in the middle, so that's where it's going to be the best. It's just crazy sharp for being wide open. This is the f1.8, which you can see is a little soft, and that's expected. That's what I've noticed with this Sony lens here, is that it is soft when it's wide open. When you stop it down, it gets a lot better, but it just doesn't even come close to what this Leica is looking like over here. Let's jump over to the corner, and actually I would give this one to the Sony, but that could be a focus issue. So let's check the rest of the corners here. That one's pretty much a tie. That one's probably, I'm going to have to say, the Leica. And this one up here, you have to give that one to the Sony. So that's interesting. Center, the Leica wins. Corners, it's pretty much a tie. Let's just go ahead and jump down to f5.6. Almost indistinguishable. The Sony's got a little bit better contrast. Both of these were shot at the exact same exposure and ISO, shutter speed, everything. So the only difference here, if you look up in the corner here, you'll see that it's ISO 100, 1/30th of a second. So that gives you kind of an idea of what the difference is as far as the light gathering capabilities of the glass itself. But this one pretty much looks like a tie. The corners, the Leica seems to be winning, and in the center it seems pretty close. So now this is where it gets kind of weird again. This Kamlan lens is throwing all kinds of craziness into the mix. So this is wide open with the Kamlan and wide open with the Sony. We got the Sony over here, f1.8, and the Kamlan over here. This is f1.1. Dead center, both of them are pretty soft. The Sony definitely beats it out, but both of them are soft. Going over to the corner, Kamlan's way out of focus. Sony smokes it here. Jumping down to f2, both of these are shot at the exact same exposure, 1/250th, f2, 50 millimeters, ISO 100. Both of them shot exactly the same, but the Kamlan is much brighter than the Sony. Is it actually a faster lens? Now we're at f5.6, both of them 1/30th of a second, both of them ISO 100. Doesn't make any sense why this one's so much brighter. But you can see the image quality came back a lot. Let's turn down the exposure to match them up a little better. In the center here, it looks like a dead tie. Both of them are incredibly sharp. I don't know if you can get any sharper than this. Up at the corners, the Kamlan looks really good up until the very top. The very top, it really falls apart. But other than that, it's very close. Now at f8, again, it's brighter. Let's go ahead and turn that down, match them up. Indistinguishable in the center. Up towards the corner, again, indistinguishable. The far corner falls apart hard, but that is literally the very, very top corner. Talk about some crazy unexpected results. I really wasn't expecting this lens to have such a weird effect. It doesn't seem to line up very well with either of these lenses here. While there was a slight focal length shift between the lenses, it wasn't really anything to make a note of. What really confused me the most is the light capturing and the background blur of this Kamlan lens. It seemed to have an even wider aperture than advertised, and it seemed to really show that off in both those tests that I did. The background was much blurrier at the same aperture settings. So the first thought with that is that this lens just isn't calibrated right. The markings don't mean anything, they're just reference points. But that would make sense if it didn't get seemingly wider than an f1.4 or an f1.8. But it seemed to get significantly wider than those when it was already wider than those at the identical apertures. So could this possibly be even wider than f1.1? I'm not sure. I don't know how to check that. But I definitely think it is at least 1.1 based on these tests. If you guys disagree or have some insight on how that could be, please leave a comment. I'm more than happy to hear anybody's opinion on this because I don't really know what it means. So if you're interested in the bewildering Kamlan lens, it'll be linked below alongside the Sony f1.8 and the Leica if you really want to go big. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was informative. Let me know if there's something I could have done better or should have done differently down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.